She entered the human's mind, expecting fear. What she found terrified the galaxy. Every telepath has a story about the first time a mind surprised them. Not the first time they were wrong about something small, misread an emotion, missed a surface thought, misjudged the depth of a feeling. Those happen constantly. Those are part of the work. The first time a mind was genuinely, fundamentally different from everything they had been trained to expect. For most telepaths, that story involves a species they hadn't encountered before, or an unusual individual, or a specific moment of contact that produced an unexpected result. High Telepath Selathi of the Varelian Concord had been reading minds for 60 years. She had encountered hundreds of species, had performed thousands of assessments under council authorization, had developed through 6 decades of direct mental contact with the full range of intelligence that the galaxy produced, the specific expertise of someone who had seen almost everything and had learned to categorize what she hadn't seen yet by its similarity to what she had. She had a story. She would have it for the rest of her life. It began with a human in a chair, and it ended with her on the floor. And what happened between those 2 moments changed the way the galaxy understood what fear was. The chamber had been designed for exactly this kind of assessment, not designed specifically for this situation. The Varelian Concord's assessment facilities were built for a broad range of applications, the various contexts in which the Council found telepathic evaluation useful. But the specifications were appropriate for what was being asked of it today: null psi walls. The specific shielding material that prevented telepathic signal from propagating beyond the chamber's boundaries, essential for controlled assessments, for ensuring that what happened inside the room stayed inside the room and that external signals didn't contaminate the evaluation. Neural dampeners. Devices that reduced the ambient cognitive noise of the chamber's occupants, making the specific signal the telepath was targeting cleaner and easier to work with. Emergency severance fields. The failsafe that every properly equipped assessment facility maintained. The specific technology that could, in cases where a telepathic connection became dangerous or uncontrolled, terminate the link with the blunt force of a system that prioritized separation over delicacy. Strong enough, the facility's specifications noted, to rip a mind link apart the way you tear wet paper. It was a well-equipped room. It would not be enough. "This will be quick," Selathi had said. She had said it to the council observers positioned at the back of the chamber, senior members of the body that had authorized the assessment, present to witness the outcome and receive her findings. She had said it with the specific confidence of someone who has done a thing many times and does not expect this instance to be meaningfully different from the previous ones. "Humans exhibit primitive emotional architecture," she continued. "The fear response is dominant and close to the surface. Under standard assessment conditions, subjects become cooperative very quickly." She had reviewed the literature on human telepathic susceptibility, the assessments that had been conducted in the early period of human galactic contact, before the Council had revised its protocols. The consistent findings: humans were noisy minds, emotionally reactive, easy to read and easier to affect. Standard penetration to the emotional core, she said. Identification of core motivations and fear structures. Assessment of potential threat posture and reliability. She looked at the chamber. 30 minutes, possibly less. The council members nodded. The human in the chair said nothing. He had been brought in 40 minutes before the assessment, standard processing. The specific bureaucratic sequence of documentation and preparation that the council's assessment protocols required. He had moved through it the way people move through procedures they find mildly tedious, cooperatively, without resistance, with the patient attentiveness of someone who is paying attention but is not alarmed. He was sitting in the assessment chair now, not restrained. The restraint systems were available. The chair was equipped with them. They could be activated by any of 3 separate controls within the room, but they had not been engaged. He had not required them, had not shown any sign of requiring them. He sat with his hands resting on his knees. His eyes, when Selathi had entered the room, had found her immediately. not threateningly. With the specific quality of attention that she had learned, over 60 years, to read in the subjects she assessed, the quality that told her something about how the mind behind the eyes related to being looked at. Most species, in the assessment, chair with a high telepath standing in front of them, showed something in their eyes: fear, defiance, anxiety. The various expressions of a being that knows it is about to have its most private contents examined. This human showed curiosity, not performed curiosity, not the social gesture of someone trying to appear unaffected. Genuine interest. The specific quality of someone who finds the situation they are in interesting. Selathi had noted it, filed it under unusual but not operationally significant. Some individuals presented it typically on surface assessment. It didn't usually affect the deeper work. "You may proceed," the arbiter said. Selathi inclined her head and reached inside. The first thing she encountered was stillness. Not the stillness of a mind that had been suppressed or shielded or artificially quieted by any of the techniques that species with awareness of telepathy sometimes used to prepare for assessment. Those had a specific quality, the quality of something managed, of stillness that was being maintained rather than naturally present. This was different, a vast, quiet presence, the specific quality of a very large space that is not empty but is organized, where the contents are present but not demanding attention. Where things are, where they are placed and stay there. Selathi had been expecting noise. Human minds, by every assessment she had read and every piece of second-hand account from colleagues who had worked with the species, were loud. Emotionally, turbulent. The specific cognitive architecture of beings whose limbic systems were proportionally large and whose emotional processing ran close to the surface of their conscious experience. This was not that. She adjusted her approach. Not significantly. What she was experiencing was unusual, but not alarming. Some individuals were simply more internally regulated than the general pattern of their species. It made the assessment slightly more demanding, not fundamentally different. She pushed deeper. The first memory surfaced the way memories surface in telepathic assessment. Not presented, not offered. Just there. The way objects are there when you move through a space. Present because the space contains them, and you have moved into the space, a small room. The specific quality of a room that is someone's, that has the marks of being lived in, of being a specific person's specific space, rather than a generic environment. Soft light. The kind that is chosen for comfort rather than function. A child. Small. The specific smallness of a young human. The vulnerability of an organism that will eventually become something considerably less vulnerable, but is not there yet. In a bed. The signs of illness visible. The pallor. The specific quality of a body fighting something. The human. Younger in this memory, but recognizably him. The specific continuity of a person across time. Sitting beside the bed. Holding the child's hand. The quality of the contact. The specific intentionality of it. The way his hand held hers, communicating something that Selathi had encountered in every species she had ever worked with. Something that was common enough to be almost universal. Love. The specific, unconditional attachment of a parent to a child, and then something underneath it. The thing that love in this specific context always sat on top of. Fear. She reached for it, expectantly. This was the structure she had been trained to work with. Love as the surface. Fear as the foundation, the fear of loss that motivated the love that was visible. Standard architecture. She reached for the fear, and the memory shifted. Smoke, fire, the specific visual chaos of a battlefield, not the sanitized imagery of a tactical display, but the immediate sensory reality of a place where violent things were happening to physical structures and physical beings. The human, older now. The marks of time and experience visible in a way they hadn't been in the first memory. moving through it. Low, fast. The specific body language of someone who has trained extensively for exactly this environment and whose training is active. Dragging, something. Someone, another human, injured. The specific quality of a body that has been damaged and is being moved by someone who is very focused on getting it somewhere safe. Selathi reached for his emotional state. The heart rate was elevated. The specific physiological indicators of stress were all present. The biochemistry of a body under significant demand, the activation of every system that beings use when they are in danger. But underneath the physiology, in the emotional core, where fear was supposed to be dominant, focus. The specific quality of a mind that has taken the energy that fear produces and is using it, not suppressing the fear, not the absence of it, but the conversion of it into something else, into the narrowed, precise attention of someone who knows exactly what they need to do and is doing it. "Stay with me," he growled in the memory. To the injured person. "You don't get to quit." Selathi pulled back slightly. Something was wrong with her map of this mind, not wrong in the sense of a mistake she had made, wrong in the sense of a map that doesn't match the territory. Her map of human psychological architecture, built from everything she had read and been trained on, said fear should be dominant here. It wasn't. She went deeper. Every mind has a core. The terminology varied by tradition and training, but every telepathic discipline that Selathi had studied acknowledged the same structure. The deep center of a conscious mind where the fundamental patterns lived, where the fears that actually governed behavior resided. Not the surface fears, but the ones so basic they were structural. She had been to the core of hundreds of minds. She knew what she was looking for. She found a door, not literal. Mindscapes were not literal. They were the mind's own representation of its structure, shaped by the specific architecture of the consciousness that housed them. But the representation was unmistakable. A boundary, a deep boundary, at the core of this mind, marking the space between the accessible regions she had been moving through and something beyond them. Every species had something like it. The deepest, fears, the fundamental structures that governed everything else. Most minds didn't know they had it. It was not a conscious construction, just the way deep psychology organized itself. This one was different. Selathi stood at it in the mindscape and felt, for the first time in the assessment, something she had not felt since early in her training. Hesitation. The boundary was reinforced. Not recently. The marks on it were old, the specific quality of something that had been worked on over a long time. Strengthened. Not by any trained telepathic technique. This human had no training in that direction, but by the specific process of a mind that had encountered something, processed it, incorporated it, and come out the other side different, scarred. But the scars were structural. They were load-bearing. She should have stopped. Every protocol she had been trained in, every guideline the Varelian Concord maintained. For responsible assessment work, the specific accumulated wisdom of 60 years of her own experience, all of it said the same thing. When you reach a boundary like this, you stop. You document what you found. You report that the deep assessment is not accessible without risk. You recommend against proceeding. She had been told this assessment was important. She had been told the results were needed. She forced the door open. The universe ended. This was not metaphor. In the mindscape, in the specific subjective reality of the telepathic connection, what happened when the boundary gave way was the dissolution of every framework she had been navigating within. Not darkness. Clarity. The specific clarity of a very large space suddenly made visible, overwhelming not because of what it contained, but because of how much of it there was and how structured it was and how different that structure was from anything she had encountered in 60 years of this work. An expanse, filled with moments. Not the chaotic distribution of a mind's contents as she usually encountered them, the organic mess of memory and emotion and association that consciousness produced when it was simply living. These were catalogued, organized with a care and deliberateness that she had never encountered in any assessment she had ever done. Loss, present, documented, not hidden, the opposite of hidden, sitting in full visibility. Pain, present, documented, the specific pain. Of experiences that had been significant enough to mark the mind permanently, and those marks not covered or minimized but incorporated, made part of the structure, failure, present, documented. The memories of things that had gone wrong, things he had not been able to prevent, things he had tried and not succeeded at. Grief, present, all of it, present, and all of it. This was the thing that made her consciousness tremble in the expanse of it. Accepted, not resigned to, not suppressed, not the acceptance of something that has broken the mind that holds it, the acceptance of something that has been processed, looked at directly, understood, incorporated. The specific quality of a mind that has looked at the worst, things it has experienced and has decided, over and over, to continue. Impossible, she whispered. She saw the child he had been, small, at a funeral, the specific grief of a child encountering death for the first time and having no framework for it. Then, standing up, she saw him in a mission that had gone wrong. The specific, irreversible wrongness of an outcome that could not be fixed, only survived. Then, going back for the ones who were still there. She saw him break, not metaphorically. The specific breaking of a mind under more weight than it was built to carry, the point where the architecture gave way, then rebuilding, over and over and over, each time differently, each time incorporating what had happened, each time coming out the other side, not the same as before, but not less than before. Different. Stronger in the specific way of things that have been broken at a load-bearing point and repaired. The repair point now often stronger than the original material. Fear was there. She found it eventually, not at the core, not in the dominant position that every assessment she had ever done had shown, the central organizing principle around which everything else arranged itself. Present. Real. Functional. But trained. The specific quality of something that has been worked with over a long time. Not suppressed. Suppression left signs she knew how to read, and those signs weren't here. Not eliminated. Fear couldn't be eliminated from a functioning mind, and she wouldn't have wanted to find it eliminated. Harnessed. The specific quality of something that has been taken, this enormous, powerful, potentially chaotic thing, and brought into relationship with the rest of the mind's functioning. Made to serve rather than to govern. Like something kept on a very short leash by a very steady hand. Selathi had been in hundreds of minds. She had never seen anything like it. She tried to retreat. The mind did not let her. Not aggressively, not. The specific resistance of a mind that is fighting the intrusion. The specific quality of something that has become aware of her presence and has oriented toward her. A presence turning. The specific quality of something very large that has been doing other things and has just noticed that something is in the space with it, not hostile, aware. You're not supposed to be here, the human said, not allowed, inside, in the mindscape. Through the connection that she had forced open and that was now, she realized with a specific quality of alarm that she had not felt in decades, not under her control. The voice was calm, the same calm as his eyes in the chair. "You can hear me?" she demanded. "I can feel you," he replied. "You're poking around." She reached for the severance field, the emergency systems that were supposed to be available to her at any point in an assessment, the fail-safe that could end a connection regardless of what was happening, activated and did nothing, the field engaged. She felt it engage. The specific sensation of the emergency protocol running, of the system doing what it was designed to do. The connection remained. Unaffected, panic surged through her. Real panic. the specific biochemical experience of a being that has realized that it is in a situation it does not have the tools to exit. The human felt it. She felt him feel it, and felt him, without any apparent decision-making process, do something she had never had anyone do to her in 60 years of this work. He steadied her, not through any technique, not through any learned telepathic method, just through the specific quality of a mind that has been in crisis many times and has developed a relationship with that state, the extension of the same steadiness that was structural in him into the connection between them. The panic reduced. Not because she had controlled it, because something in the connection was acting as a buffer, holding the panic at a level that was not incapacitating. And in the reduced panic, the mindscape showed her one more thing. Not a memory. Intent. The difference was significant in telepathic assessment, the difference between what a mind had experienced and what it was oriented toward, between where a being had been and what it was for. She saw humanity, not as statistics, not as the profile she had been briefed on, population numbers and technological assessments and the various metrics that the Council used to categorize species, as purpose, a species that had emerged from a world that was trying constantly to end them, that had built civilization on the specific foundation of beings who had survived things that should have ended them and had learned from the survival, that had developed, over the entire arc of their history, a specific orientation. Guardians, not the word they would use. She was in his mind, reading the concept beneath the language, the specific intention of beings whose response to encountering vulnerability was not to exploit it, not to manage it, not to assess its strategic implications, to stand between it and whatever was threatening it, the small, the helpless, the young, not because they were commanded to, not because it was strategically advantageous, because they had decided, somewhere in the long accumulation of what they were, that this was what they did, that this was who they were. We endure, the human said, so others don't have to. And Selathi, high telepath of the Virelian Concord, 60 years of professional equanimity behind her, screamed. The scream came out of her physical body. Not the controlled vocal output of a being choosing to make a sound, the specific involuntary release of a nervous system that has been overwhelmed, that has received more than it can process in the normal channels and is routing it through. Whatever is available. She convulsed. The observers at the back of the chamber were already on their feet. Sever the link. The emergency field isn't responding. What's happening to her? Selathi! Her eyes were wide, not with the quality of someone looking at something, with the quality of someone who is seeing something that is not in the room. Blood ran from her nose. The specific physical sign of a telepathic stress response, the capillaries under pressure from the neurological activation of a system being asked to process something beyond its capacity. The human in the chair looked at her, with the specific quality of attention that had been in his eyes from the beginning, not alarmed. Careful? Hey, he said. His voice was gentle. You okay? The link released. Not broken. Released. The specific distinction of a connection that ends because it has been let go rather than because it has been severed. The human had let her go. Selathi collapsed forward. Her hands caught the edge of the assessment dais, the specific grip of someone who is using whatever is available to prevent themselves from going all the way down. She stayed there for a moment. Breathing. The specific quality of someone relearning the most basic elements of physical functioning after a period of profound disruption. Then she went all the way down. Lay on the floor, looking at the ceiling of the assessment chamber, the null psi material, the specific surface of a room designed for containment, the functional overhead lighting. Alive, present, changed. The arbiter appeared in her field of vision. Ancient, experienced. Whatever he had seen in this chamber in his career, and he had seen considerable things, was insufficient preparation for his current expression. Telepath Selathi, he said. His voice was controlled with the effort of someone who has decided that control is what the situation requires. Report. She looked at him. He saw her eyes. He stepped back. Not dramatically. The involuntary step of a being that has seen something in another being's eyes and has registered it on a level below the decision to register it. Her eyes were different, not damaged, not the glazed quality of neurological injury or the specific blankness of dissociation. Older. The specific quality of someone who has seen things that have added permanently to their age in a way that had nothing to do with the passage of time. "There is no fear," she said. Her voice was rough. The voice of vocal cords that had been used in ways they had not been asked to be used for a long time. The chamber froze. Not metaphorically. The specific simultaneous stillness of multiple beings all receiving the same alarming input and all arriving at the same need to make sure they had received it correctly. "What?" someone said. Selathi pushed herself upright, slowly. The process of someone who is rebuilding their relationship with the physical world after a period of absence from it. "In humans," she said, "fear is not absent. It is not—" She paused, searching for the right language, the specific vocabulary that would carry the weight of what she was trying to communicate. "Not what I expected it to be." She looked at the council members. "It is not dominant. It is not the organizing principle of the psychology. It is not what makes them manageable." She swallowed. The specific action of someone preparing to say something that they know will be difficult to say. "What is dominant," she said, "is responsibility." The silence that followed had a quality she recognized now from the inside of the human mind. She had just been in. Not empty. Full. The specific fullness of a very large space that is absorbing something significant. She stood. The physical process of it was effortful in a way that standing had not been effortful for her in many years. She was aware of her own body in the specific way you become aware of it when it has been through something. "They do not fear pain," she said. "They expect it." She looked at the chamber, at the beings who had authorized this assessment and had been sitting at the back of it waiting for the information she was now providing. "They do not fear loss." Her voice steadied as she spoke, the specific steadying of someone who has found the thing they need to say and is now saying it. They prepare for it. They build their psychology around the assumption of it. They incorporate the experience of it into their structure in ways that make them more functional rather than less. A pause. They fear becoming the thing that causes harm to those who cannot protect themselves. She looked at the human in the chair. He was watching her. The same gentle, curious quality. "They fear," she said, "failing the ones they are supposed to protect." The chamber was very still. The human tilted his head. "Wow," he said. His voice was quiet, not unkind. The specific quality of someone processing an experience. "You went pretty deep, huh?" Several of the guards near the door made involuntary movements. Not aggressive, the specific physical response of beings who have received a social cue and are responding to it before they have decided to respond. Selathi laughed. The sound that came out of her was not the laugh of someone who has found something funny. It was the laugh of someone who has been through a great deal and has arrived at a moment that would be funny under different circumstances, and whose nervous system is using the available response patterns to process the residue of what it has been through. A broken sound, but genuine. "I saw what happens," she said when it passed, "when the leash comes off." She looked at the council. When whatever is holding that capacity in check is removed. When the thing that is harnessed is released. She was quiet for a moment. "You have been mistaking restraint for weakness," she said. "You have been looking at a species that holds its capabilities in check and interpreting the check as the limit of the capabilities." She looked at the human. "It isn't." The arbiter's voice had changed. Not in tone. He was still maintaining the specific vocal quality of institutional authority. But underneath it, the quality of a being who is reassessing something fundamental and has not yet fully completed the reassessment. "Human," he said. "What would cause the restraint to end?" The human considered the question. Not performatively. with the actual consideration of someone who is taking the question seriously and thinking about its answer. Hurt someone who can't fight back, he said. A pause. In front of us, another pause. Or give us no other choice. He looked at the arbiter with the same steady quality that had been in his eyes from the beginning. Those are the two things, he said. That's it. There are two things that take the restraint off. He said it the way you say something that is a fact, not a threat. He wasn't threatening anything, not performing. There was no audience he was playing to, just stating the two conditions that his psychology had identified as the ones that changed the operating parameters. Hurt someone who can't fight back, he repeated, or leave us no other choice. The chamber's lighting did not change. Nothing physical happened. But the quality of the air in the room was different. The specific quality of a room that has received information and is now organized around it. Later. Long after the human had been escorted out, peacefully, through the standard exit process, with the specific quality of someone who had sat in an assessment chair for an hour and was now going back to wherever he had been before, the council archived the incident. The official documentation was thorough. It covered the assessment procedure, the anomalous outcomes, the medical treatment provided to High Telepath Selathi, the failure of the emergency severance field, the complete transcript of everything that had been said in the chamber. It was labeled, in the council's filing system, unauthorized. Telepathic contact, catastrophic psychological event, assessment, suspended. In the section reserved for operational recommendations, the archivist who compiled the document included a single line from Selathi's formal debrief. High Telepath Selathi recommends against further telepathic assessment of human subjects without significant revision to current protocols. She declines to specify what revisions would be sufficient. When asked to elaborate, she stated, "I don't know what would be sufficient. I know what I saw. I recommend we don't find out what happens when what I saw isn't restrained." The archivist added a note. It was not standard practice to add personal notes to official council archives. The archivist added one anyway, because the archivist had been in the chamber, had seen Selathi's eyes before and after, and had decided that the official documentation did not fully capture what the incident had produced. The note read, "This incident is being filed as a psychological event. I want to note, for whoever reads this record, that what happened in that chamber was not primarily a psychological event. It was an intelligence event. We have been assessing humanity using frameworks built on incorrect assumptions about what human psychology was. We have been measuring fear as the primary variable and concluding from the measurements that humans were manageable. They are manageable." High Telepath. Selathi's report is clear on this. The human in the assessment chair was managing himself, and had been doing so for his entire life, and the management was voluntary and was maintained by choice rather than by inability to do otherwise. We have been mistaking the choice to be managed for the absence of the capacity to be otherwise. These are not the same thing. I do not know what the operational implications of this distinction are. I know that someone should think about them very carefully. Among telepaths, in the specific community of practitioners who shared professional information through channels, that the council's official communication structures didn't fully capture, something different circulated. Not the archived report, not the official documentation, something shorter. Something that passed between practitioners in the specific way that important practical information passes, not through formal channels but through the informal transmission of things that matter. A warning, short, clear, the specific economy, of language that emergency information uses when the goal is to be understood rather than to be comprehensive. Do not enter the human mind uninvited, not because you cannot, because of what you will find. A mind that has looked at every terrible thing that can happen to a person, looked at it directly, without flinching, without turning away, and has decided to continue. A mind that has taken fear and turned it into something that fear was not designed to be. A mind that is holding, voluntarily, something that should not be holdable. And if you are in that mind when it looks at you, when it becomes aware that you are there, uninvited, in the space where that thing is held. You will understand something. You will understand what it means to be in the presence of something that is choosing restraint, and you will understand, in a way that cannot be unfelt, what the alternative looks like. Do not enter the human mind. You might not survive what they live with every day. Selathi returned to work 6 weeks after the incident. Her colleagues noted changes, not incapacitating. Changes. She remained functional, remained skilled, remained the high telepath that 60 years of work had made her. She conducted assessments. She filed reports. She attended the professional functions that her role required. But different. The specific difference of someone who has learned something that has permanently reorganized the framework through which they experience their work. She was more careful, not more hesitant, more precise. The specific precision of someone who has encountered something that has clarified exactly what they are dealing with and has updated their practice accordingly. She never discussed the ERIS 9 assessment publicly, not because she had been asked. To keep it confidential, the official record was archived and accessible to anyone with appropriate clearance. Because it was hers in a way that things that change you are yours, and the specific nature of what it had changed in her was not something she wanted to put in public language. When younger telepaths asked her about it, and they did because the incident had circulated in the professional community and questions were inevitable, she gave a version of an answer that was accurate without being complete. I encountered a mind that had accepted its own suffering, she would say. Not endured it, accepted it. There is a difference, she would pause. And I encountered what that acceptance made possible. Another pause. That is all I am going to tell you. She would look at them. That is enough. The galaxy continued. As it does, as it always does. The vast machinery of civilizations and politics, and the ordinary and extraordinary events of intelligent life spread across the stars, processing itself forward through time with the specific continuity of something too large to be stopped by any single event. But in certain rooms, in certain conversations, in the specific context of discussions about humanity, what they were capable of, what the appropriate framework was for thinking about their place in the galaxy's structure, something had changed. The assessment that had been conducted in that chamber had produced a finding that was not in the official record. The official record documented the failure of the assessment procedure, the medical event involving high Telepath Selathi, the specific anomalies that had prevented the assessment from proceeding normally. The unofficial finding, the one that circulated in the professional community and in the back channels of the Council's intelligence apparatus and in the specific conversations of beings who were trying to think clearly about what humanity actually was simpler. Fear does not control humanity. The thing that controls humanity, the thing that is actually at the center of the psychological architecture that governs their behavior, is something else. Responsibility. The specific orientation of beings who have decided, somewhere deep and structural, that what they do matters and that mattering requires them to be present and to continue, to stand between the darkness and the small and the helpless and the young, to endure. So that others don't have to. That was not a weakness. That was not a primitive emotional center easily penetrated and manipulated under assessment conditions. That was the thing that fear, when it worked correctly, was supposed to produce, and humanity had built it into their foundation, not when they were afraid. Always. The universe doesn't scream when humanity acts. Selathi had said this in her debrief. Not in the official statement, in the conversation afterward, with the archivist who had been in the room, in the specific context of two beings who had been through something and were trying to put it in words. What is it like? The archivist had asked. When the restraint comes off, what does it look like from inside? Selathi had been quiet for a long time. I didn't see it fully, she said. I saw what it was oriented toward, what it was capable of. A pause. The universe doesn't scream, she said. When humans act, when they actually act, fully, without restraint, with everything they are pointed at something. She looked at the archivist. It goes quiet. The way everything goes quiet, she said, when something very large and very certain is moving. She looked at her hands, and then the thing it was moving toward is gone. A pause, and the quiet is all that's left. She was silent for a moment. Recommend, she said, that we never give them a reason to move.